Hello, welcome back, or if you're new here, welcome. Please stick around. My name's Alex. I cover all things nerdy when it comes to Lord of the Rings, Warhammer, Dungeons & Dragons, you name it. I cover it, even a little bit of open world gaming has my name on it. I'm here to talk to you about War of the Rohirrim. Now, I was fortunate enough to go and watch War of the Rohirrim at the world premiere, and I am so grateful, as a huge fan of Tolkien, to have been able to do that. The premise of this video is going to be my initial reactions. Here's how I'm going to structure it, because there will be spoilers, so please come back and watch this after you've seen the movie if you do not want to expose yourself in that way to any spoilers. Or if you'd like to stick with me through the whole thing, then thank you so much for being here. Right, let's go. Here's the structure. I'm going to give a little bit of a breakdown into the lore behind what the movie was based on. I'm going to explain it in a way that's not confusing. I find that when people do lore breakdowns, they throw in so many complex phrases, language, that it puts you off and your brain goes, nope, it's not for me. And then that becomes laborious and you don't really want to watch it any further. I'm going to try and keep it as simple as possible. Wish me luck. We'll then have a look at the original source material. So we'll dip into that a little bit and then I'll hit you with my review. So in terms of spoilers, you're okay to stick with me for probably the majority of this video before you leave me. Anyway, I digress. Shall we talk about it? We're introduced to Helm Hammerhand. He was the 9th king of Rohan. Think of him as a sort of like Ned Stark meets William Wallace with the strength of the Hulk. He was born during the Third Age, in a time when Rohan was kind of in the thick of it, especially under his grandfather's rule. You see, there were these wild men called the Dunlendings who were loyal to Sauron, and they had taken over Isengard. I mean, talk about being in a bad neighbourhood. Helm grew up watching his family and his people in constant conflict with the Dunlendings, and when his father died, Helm stepped up to the plate, but the trouble didn't just magically disappear. Enter Freke, a man of descent from both Dunlendings and Rohan, who thought he was the big dog on campus because he had land on both sides of the river, kind of right between Rohan and Isengard. Freke rolls into a council meeting one day, having never attended any before, uninvited, with a posse of guys, and he drops a bombshell that he wants Helm's daughter to marry his son, Wolf. Now, Helm, being the guy that he is, he's not having it. He throws some playful insults Freke's way. He calls him fat, which really ruffles Freke's feathers. Now, Freke gets all huffy and he challenges Helm. And Helm says, no, do you know what, I'm not having this. You will not challenge me in my home. But we can take this outside. Man to man, let's go. Helm delivers a knockout punch that would make Mike Tyson proud. He quite literally takes Freke out with one hit, and Freke is stone cold dead. And that's where he earned his nickname, Hammerhand. After that, he declares any followers of Freke's to be enemies, and they all flee, and things get a little bit quiet. Helm's living an okay life. He's still keeping things at bay, and he's managing things quite well. But then, surprise, Freke's followers, led by Wolf, come back to Rohan a few years later. Helm is ready to rumble, he gets going, but things don't go his way this time, and he's pushed back to a place called Suthberg. And to make matters worse, Helm loses his eldest son in battle. He's then also separated from his nephew Freolaf, who takes a group of Rohirrim men to Dunharrow. Now, Helm's in a bit of a pickle here. He's trapped in a siege, and he's also feeling pretty crap because, you know, he's lost his son, his nephew's gone, he's got one son left, and then they're hit with the long winter. And then his son, Hammer, wants to go out and find food because everything's running low. Supplies, food, you name it. Helm says he advises against it. He says, don't do it. It's freezing, it's dangerous. It's not a good idea. Hammer's like, it's fine, I'll go. I'll take a group of men. Off I go into the wild, into enemy territory, and they all vanish. They never return. Now both of his sons are gone. Helm is just filled with this rage and this grief, so he decides to take matters into his own hands. He dresses in white and he sneaks out of the Suthberg in stealth mode, causing chaos in the enemy territory. He rips men apart with his bare hands, and then these rumours start flying that he was so fierce that people thought he was eating the guys that he took down. Every time he showed up, he would blow his horn to announce his arrival and to let the men know they were about to be torn to shreds, turning the Suthberg into Hornburg, and the Dunlendings would just scatter out of fear. They didn't even try and take him on, they just ran. One day they hear his horn, but they don't see him. They do this every time. I'm so sorry. They hear his horn, but there's no sign of him. And then eventually they spot him, and he's standing alone in the sunlight. He's looking all heroic. His knees are unbent, but he's dead. Eventually, the long winter comes to an end, and Helm's nephew, Freolaf, makes his move. He returns, he leads a surprise attack on Wolf in Edoras. Wolf's not expecting it. It doesn't go to plan. For him, anyway. He's slain, and Rohan is saved, and Freolaf becomes the 10th king of Rohan. Helm's body is laid to rest on the 9th mound outside Edoras. Guess what? The symbol moon of flowers, they bloom thickest on his grave, and they make it look like a blanket of snow. I actually have them here. I don't know if you can see, with Gimli's helmet. They're beautiful. I don't know how to angle my arm in. There's one. There we go. There's one there. Anyway. Fast forward, and Rohan gets a visitor, a wizard named Saruman, who brings gifts and a lot of sweet talk, and Freolaf, being the hospitable man that he is, lets him hang out in Orthanc, and we all know how that ends. And that gorge, where Helm Hammerhand met his fate, it becomes so important for Rohan's survival and is adaptly named Helm's Deep. I tried to make that really dramatic and a little bit cringy at the end, wasn't it? It didn't quite go to plan. Anyway, I hope that makes sense. We're now going to roll onto the direct source material. No spoilers yet, literally just source material and lore on what this movie is based on, so you don't need to stop watching as of yet or skip ahead, whatever it is I need to advise you to do at this point. But yes. So if you would like to read along with me for the source material, I'm reading The Return of the King. I'm in Appendix A, Part 2, and it is titled The House of Earl, and I have skipped ahead slightly to page 1040. I think it'll be slightly different in different texts, but we're predominantly starting here. The paragraph starts, of the kings of the Mark. Of the kings of the Mark between Earl and Theoden, most is said of Helm Hammerhand. He was a grim man of great strength. There was at a time a man named Freka, who claimed descent from King Freowyne. Though he had, men said, much Dunlandish blood, he was dark-haired. He grew rich and powerful, having wide lands on either side of the Adorn. Near its source he made himself a stronghold, and paid little heed to the king. Helm mistrusted him. He called him to councils, and he came when it pleased him. To one of those councils Freka rode with many men, and he asked the hand of Helm's daughter for his son Wolf. But Helm said, "You have grown big since you were last here, but mostly fat, I guess." The men laughed at that, for Freka was wide in the belt. Then Freka fell in a rage, and rivalled the king, and said at last, "Old kings that refuse a proffered staff may fall on their knees." And Helm answered, "Come, the marriage of your son is a trifle. Let Helm and Freka deal with it later. Meanwhile, the king and his council have matters of moment to consider." When the council was over, Helm stood up and laid his great hand on Freka's shoulder, saying, "The king does not permit brawls in his house, but men are freer outside." And he forced Freka to walk before him out of the Edoras into the field. To Freka's men that came up, he said, "Be off! We need no hearers. We are going to speak of a private matter alone. Go and talk to my..." So sorry. Go and talk to my men. And they looked and saw that the king's men and his friends far outnumbered them, and they drew back. "Now, Dunlanding," said the king, "you have only Helm to deal with, alone and unarmed. But you have said much already, and it is my turn to speak. Freka, your folly has grown with your belly. You talk of a staff. If Helm dislikes a crooked staff that is thrust on him, he breaks it so." With that he smote Freka such a blow with his fist that he fell back stunned and died soon after. Helm then proclaimed Freka's son and near kin the king's enemies, and they fled, for at once Helm sent many men riding to the west marches. 4 years later, great troubles came to Rohan, and no help could be sent from Gondor, for 3 fleets of the corsairs attacked it, and there was war on all its coasts. At the time, Rohan was again invaded from the east, and the Dunlendings, seeing their chance, came over the Isen and down from Isengard. It was soon known that Wulf was their leader. They were in great force, for they were joined by enemies of Gondor that landed in the mouths of Lefnui and Isen. The Rohirrim were defeated, and their land was overrun, and those who were not slain or enslaved fled to the dales of the mountains. Helm was driven back with great loss from the crossings of Isen and took refuge in the Hornburg and the ravine beyond, which was known after as Helm's Deep. There he was besieged. Wulf took Edoras and sat in Meduseld and called himself king. There Harlith, Helm's son, fell, last of all, defending the doors. Soon afterwards, the long winter began, and Rohan lay under snow for nearly 5 months, from November to March. Both the Rohirrim and their foes suffered grievously in the cold, and in the dearth that lasted longer. In Helm's Deep there was a great hunger after Yule, and being in despair against the king's counsel, Hammer, his younger son, led men out on a foray, but they were lost in the snow. Helm grew fierce and gaunt for famine and grief, and the dread of him alone was worth many men in the defence of the burg. He would go out by himself, clad in white, and stalk like a snow troll into the camps of his enemies, and slay many men with his hands. It was believed that if he bore no weapon would bite on him. The Dunlendings said that if he could find no food, he ate men. That tale lasted long in Dunland. Helm had a great horn, and soon it was marked that before he sallied forth, he would blow a blast upon it that echoed in the deep. And then so great a fear fell on his enemies, and instead of gathering to take him or kill him, they fled away down the Coombe. One night men heard the horn blowing, but Helm did not return. In the morning there came a sun gleam, the first for long days, and they saw a white figure, standing still on the dyke alone, for none of the Dunlendings dared come near. There stood Helm, dead as stone, but his knees were unbent. Yet men said that the horn was still heard at times in the deep, and the wraith of Helm would walk among the foes of Rohan and kill men with fear. Soon after the winter broke, Freolaf, son of Hild, Helm's sister, came down out of Dunharrow, to which many had fled, with a small company of desperate men. He surprised Wulf in Medus and slew him, and regained Edoras. There were great floods after the snows, and the vale of Entwash became a vast fen. The eastern invaders perished or withdrew, and there came help at last from Gondor, by the roads both east and west of the mountains. Before the year was ended, the Dunlendings were driven out even from Isengard, and then Freolaf became king. Helm was brought from the Hornburg and laid in the 9th mound. Ever after, the white Cymbalmuna grew there most thickly, so that the mound seemed to be snow-clad. When Freolaf died, a new line of mounds was begun. The Rohirrim were grievously reduced by war and dearth and loss of cattle and horses, and it was well that no great danger threatened them again for many years, for it was not until the time of King Folkwine that they recovered their former strength. It was at the crowning of Freolaf that Saruman appeared, bringing gifts and speaking great praise of the valour of the Rohirrim. All thought him a welcome guest, and soon after he took up his abode in Isengard. For this, Beren, the steward of Gondor, gave him leave, for Gondor still claimed Isengard as a fortress of its realm, not part of Rohan. Beren also gave in to Saruman's keeping the keys of Orthanc. That tower no enemy had been able to harm or to enter. In this way, Saruman began to behave as a lord of men, for at first he held Isengard as a lieutenant of the steward and warden of the tower, but Freyla was as glad as Beren to have this so, and to know that Isengard was in the hands of a strong friend. A friend he long seemed, and maybe in the beginning he was one in truth. Though afterwards there was little doubt in the mind went to Isengard in hope to find the stone still there, and with the purpose of building up a power of his own. Certainly, after the last White Council, his designs toward Rohan, though he hid them, were evil. He then took Isengard for his own and began to make it a place of guarded strength and fear, as though to rival the Barad-dûr. His friends and servants he drew from all those who hated Gondor and Rohan, whether men or other creatures more evil. And that commences. We have my little analogy, or no, not analogy, summary. We have my little summary, hopefully made, condensed down in a way that makes sense to newcomers to the lore. We have word for word the source material from start to finish. And now we're going to jump into how they put this movie together and my first initial impressions from only seeing it once. So it's at this point now, I'm about to throw in a bunch of spoilers. So if you'd like to stop and leave me, I'm not judging you and I do not blame you. If you'd like to stay and find out, all the merrier. If you're going to come back, then hi, welcome back. As always, I appreciate you being here. Let's go. Okay, so here's what I thought about the movie. And kind of like Rings of Power, I definitely plan to give it another watch because I feel like you always catch more second go around, especially when you've got more of a clearer picture of what you're looking for. Right, first off, let's talk about Hera, because I was ready for those changes with the lore. I actually ended up liking her character a lot more than I thought I would. She reminded me kind of like a mashup between Arya Stark from Game of Thrones and Astrid from How to Train Your Dragon. You got the vibe that she could be your friend or your sister, someone you can really resonate with. She's loyal and she has this moral compass that's all about kindness and compassion. Even though she doesn't really want to be a leader, she's got that natural ability. And right from the start, you get this clear picture of who she is. I did feel like we didn't really need the constant reminders that she prefers riding horses and fighting over being the typical Lady of Rohan, but I get it. They needed to emphasize her values as the main protagonist, and her character traits, they did feel a bit familiar, but I didn't mind it. Visually, the movie was brilliant. I'm not an anime I'm not an anime expert by any means, but I thought they captured the details from the films fantastically. If you pay attention to the Middle-earth strategy battle game characters and obviously the movies, you'll see that the armour and even just down to the details of the shields, they look just like they did in the movies and those miniatures, and I think that's so important. The buildings, they had this really classic design of Rohan, and it just brought back some serious nostalgia. I especially loved Freka's look, especially those blue markings. They take you right back to Alan Lee's artwork, and you can really see that nod to Tolkien's universe and that little bit of respect there. And it's fantastic. The backdrops were stunning. We got to see Oliphants, and we even got a Watcher in the water, which was pretty cool. The only thing I wasn't totally on board with was Hera's outfits. I do get and I do appreciate that it is an anime thing. I'm just not sure that the thigh-high boots in Middle-earth were necessary, but maybe that's just me being pedantic. Okay, now there's this lady in the trailer. I'm pointing here, maybe I need to point here when I edit this, who knows. Maybe I even need to do this, but this lady, wherever I put her, somewhere here on the screen for you to see, she's actually a pretty significant character. And that's a change that I wasn't expecting. Especially from the trailers, you don't get the sense that she's going to be prominent, and she really is. So she's Hera's handmaid. And it turns out that she's the last remaining shield maiden of Rohan. So they explain it that there were these brave women who defended Rohan when all the men were away or dead, and she was the last one standing. And it's sort of a secret from the people of Rohan, and originally it's also a secret from us as viewers in the beginning, and you think that it's just a folklore, just a tale that's told because it's introduced in a way of it's like, you know, Hera's explaining it to the council, and she's telling the story, and then all of a sudden at the end, a little child or somebody, I can't quite remember, but somebody says, well, where are they all now? And she says, well, they're all gone, at least most of them. And then you're thinking, who are these secret shield maidens and why are they hiding? Anyway, her relationship with Hera helps inspires Hera's heroic qualities, and then you kind of see where she gets her attributes from, which does make sense for the stance that the movie's taking. But honestly, I sort of felt like they brushed over how this fits into the larger lore, and that's where the film fell short for me a little bit. If you're not familiar with the backstory, it can be tough to keep a grasp on what's going on, and at times it did feel more like a long TV episode that did require prior knowledge than a movie packed with history and heroism and really deep-rooted lore, which ultimately is what it's about. Let's talk about Helm. He was fantastic. They really, really nailed his character, from his mannerisms to just his overall vibe. Freyolaf also came across as this calm, collected and skilled warrior. However, there was a twist in the lore where Helm actually banishes him for failing to protect Hera, and Hera's little handmaid has to step in and rescue her from Wolf because he's kidnapped her as part of his revenge mission, but we'll get back to that in a minute. But still, you can see why people would follow Freyolaf. He's loyal to a fault, and he even says to Helm something along the lines of, as he's literally being banished, "You have my sword, even when you don't want it." And it just shows what a great character he is, and obviously why he ends up becoming such a prominent figure. Okay, Wolf. I saved him for last for a reason. He was my biggest annoyance in the movie, and I really don't like saying this. He felt like he walked straight out of something like Twilight or ACOTAR. He proposes to Hera, and she says no, because she's not into marriage. It's not her. Think Arya Stark, when she's literally, this is what I mean with familiarity. You've got Sansa Stark ready to be, you know, the lady of House Stark, ready to marry Joffrey, ready to step into that role, do what she needs to do. And Arya, she's there with her dancing instructor, she's there sword fighting, she's there refusing to wear dresses and just staying true to herself. And that's where you feel like you've met this character before. It's where it comes into it. And she says no, for all of those reasons. Nothing to do with him, just all of her own moral values. I'm not doing this. These men, they're talking about me like I'm not in the room. How dare they make this decision without me? I don't want to get married. Nobody's even talked to me about this. We have that whole speech from her, which is great. Anyway, he proposes, she says no, and then suddenly he's throwing this tantrum, like this big tantrum about it. And seriously, he will not let it go. Literally the whole movie. Why is he not good enough? Why doesn't she love him? What did he ever do wrong? Why doesn't she like him? Why doesn't she want him? It goes on and on and on. And then we get these flashbacks of them as childhood best friends. Sean Connery's coming up. Childhood best friends. Childhood best friends, which kind of makes no sense since Freka never really visits Edoras publicly. But now they're hanging out like it's Romeo and Juliet. They're banned from being together by their families, but they're still finding ways to hang out in secret. I don't know. There wasn't really any context there. And I do feel like with a bit more explanation, it just needed a little bit more and it would have been great. But anyway, because Hera, she won't marry him, his ego is bruised. And instead of seeking revenge for his father, seeking revenge for his legacy, seeking revenge for his people who were banished and told they were enemies, he's literally all about getting back at her for rejecting him. He even looks a bit like Scar from The Lion King. He even rallies his own band of misfits, just like the hyenas. He doesn't care about their welfare. He refuses them food and respect, just like Scar does in the end of The Lion King. He gets a whole army of Dunlendings, but he ignores counsel. And he doesn't seem very smart about earning their respect, and that was probably my biggest letdown. He had so much potential, and I just expected more from him. You don't muster up the command of Dunlendings by being hell-bent on a broken ego, and it just didn't quite add up. Anyway, I plan to watch it again, just to see if I can view it from a different perspective. Try and maybe look at it from new angles. The soundtrack was beautiful. At times it did feel a little bit Avengers, but I do put that down to being true to anime style. But it was definitely like being back in Middle-earth, and they did a fantastic job with it. I do worry for how it will be received. I worry for how this video will be received because the community is so divided. But it is just my opinion. It's not accurate. It's not an accurate opinion. It's just my opinion. There's no right or wrong way to feel about it. I did enjoy it. I just felt there were things initially on my first impression. There were things that probably could have been done a little better. Either way, it's a movie you can enjoy on your own. It's a movie for a date or even with your family. There's characters in there that will appeal to all sorts of interests. There's even some humour thrown in, and that's quite rare these days to have all of those things in one setting. So credit to them. Credit to them for stepping up to the mark and doing this. Not many would have. And also credit for them for throwing in anime into Tolkien's world. I didn't really think that would happen again, and here we are. So it is exciting in lots of ways. If you've stuck with me this far, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being here. If you came back, I appreciate you for even thinking about coming back in the first place. That's incredible. Also really keen to know what you think. If you've seen the movie, please share your comments. I'd love to talk to you about it. If you haven't seen the movie but you've watched this, I'm intrigued to know what you're expecting. And ultimately, I just implore you to do all of those things you need to do to support my tiny channel. I love doing long form videos, but it's so hard to crack this YouTube algorithm. So even a little emoji in the comments will just really help me and my tiny channel. So as always, thank you so much for being here, and I really hope to see you in the next video.